Mercury was launched in 1939 to fill the gap between the Ford Deluxe and the Lincoln Zephyr. Named for the fleet-footed Roman messenger of the gods, it was essentially just a bigger version of the Ford, using a 116-inch wheelbase, 4 inches longer than Ford's, with similar increases in length and weight. The V8 was bored out to 239 cubic inches, or 3.9 liters, to produce 95 horsepower, 10 more than the top Ford. Priced between $900 and $1,000, it started $400 above the base Ford, and about where the top Ford Deluxe left off. With sales in excess of 65,000 its first year, it leapt ahead of many more established brands. With the update of 1941, wheelbase was stretched 2 inches, still 4 inches above the Ford, and front styling and trim became unique to the brand. Also, a wagon was added. For 1942, horsepower increased to 100, and a short-lived semi-automatic Liqui-matic transmission became available. But production for the year was cut short due to the war, to resume again in 1946, with the only significant change being a short run of Sportsman Woody convertibles, when Lincoln and Mercury would functionally become a single division as Lincoln Mercury. And in Canada, Mercury would start offering a version of the Ford F-Series pickup as the M-Series, as well as the spin-off Meteor and Monarch divisions. With the post-war redesign of 1949, Mercury became more of a down-market Lincoln than an up-market Ford. Wheelbase remained the same, but length increased 5 inches to 207, and weight was up almost 200 pounds to near 3,600. The V8 was up to 255 cubic inches, or 4.2 liters, and 110 horsepower, for a top speed near 85, and taking 21 seconds to do the quarter mile. Sales would climb above 300,000, pushing Mercury to 6th in the U.S. market, making this their most successful model. Up to this point, Mercuries were typically referred to simply as the 8, but for 1950, the Monterey name was added to designate the new coupe with a canvas or vinyl top. Ford's Cruise-O-Matic automatic transmission also became available, marketed as the Merc-O-Matic. With the restyle of 1952, length was back down to 202 inches, but weight remained the same. The Monterey name carried over as the top trim level, and lesser models were designated custom. Although Mercury dropped to 8th overall in sales, it had 5% market share, its best ever. The flathead V8 was replaced by an overhead valve design for 1954, and although it was only up 1 cubic inch, horsepower jumped from 125 to 161. But displacement increased with the update the following year to 292 cubic inches, or 4.8 liters, with 188 to 198 horsepower. In the new top trim, Montclair, wheelbase was up 1 inch, length 4 inches, and weight 200 pounds. For 1956, base models were renamed Medalist, and the V8 was up to 312 cubic inches, or 5.1 liters, and 210 to 235 horsepower, an engine shared with the top-line Ford models. The redesign of 1957 was up to an 122-inch wheelbase, length was 211 inches, and weight to 4,200 pounds. The base Medalist was dropped, but there was a new top-line Turnpike Cruiser as Mercury moved up market. The 312 carried over as the base engine, and there was an optional 6-liter 368 with 290 horsepower. 1958 added a long 125-inch wheelbase Park Lane model to the line, and all models would have quad headlights. The 368 was replaced by a 6.3-liter 383 with 312 to 330 horsepower, while Lincoln's 7-liter 430 became available with 360 to 400 horsepower as the Marauder or Super Marauder V8. Revised for 1959, the Turnpike Cruiser was gone, and all models moved to a 126-inch wheelbase. Prices ranged from $2,800 to $3,200. A compact model arrived at dealerships for 1960 that was originally intended to be an Edsel. Called the Comet, it was 195 inches long on a 114-inch wheelbase, except the wagon, which shared the structure with the smaller Ford Falcon. Initially, the only engine was a 2.4-liter, 144 cubic inch straight six with 90 horsepower, and prices started around $2,000. With the 1961 restyle, the big Mercs would once again be sharing their primary body structure with Ford on a 1-inch longer, 120-inch wheelbase, and engines would also be shared with Ford, from the 223 straight six to the 4.8-liter 292, 5.8-liter 352, and 6.4-liter 390 V8s, as well as the 144 and 2.8-liter 170 straight sixes in the Comet. Like Ford, a midsize model arrived for 1962 as the Meteor, 204 inches long on a 117-inch wheelbase and 3,000 to 3,200 pounds, an inch longer in wheelbase and 7 inches longer overall than Ford's Fairlane, while sharing its 170 and 3.6-liter 221 sixes and 4.3-liter 260 V8. But it would only last for 2 years. The restyled Comet of 1964 gained a high-performance Cyclone package. Unlike the earlier S22 package, it included actual performance options, including a limited run of 50 lightweight 427 powered race cars. The big cars would be redesigned for 1965, and wheelbase increased to 123 inches, still 4 inches longer than Ford. And Mercury was trying to associate itself more with the Lincolns they were sold alongside of. The Comet would get stacked headlights that year that would carry over to the redesign the following year, when it would grow in size to become a twin to the Ford Fairlane. The following year, Mercury got its own version of the Mustang as the Cougar, 7 inches longer on a 3-inch longer wheelbase, initially with just the 4.7-liter 289 and 6.4-liter 390 V8s, although options would quickly expand, as would performance options. In fact, 1968 would see several revisions, including the Comet transitioning into the Montego, and the performance-oriented Cyclone would become its own model line, while it would be the final year of the Canadian pickups. Updated standard models for '69 got bigger once again, gaining another inch in wheelbase, except for the Performance Marauder, which used the smaller Ford 121-inch wheelbase, which, like the top-end Marquis, would resemble a Lincoln even more. Ford would import their sporty Capri from Europe as a Mercury model for 1970. It was 168 inches long on a 101-inch wheelbase and 2,300 pounds, powered by a 1.6-liter 4 with 71 horsepower. The Comet name would return to the compact market in 1971 as a twin to the Ford Maverick, when the Cougar would get bigger, like its Ford Mustang counterpart. But in 1974, when the Mustang was downsized, the Cougar transitioned to the midsize platform as a touring coupe that would compete more with the likes of the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme. However, Mercury did soon get a version of the Pinto of its own, as the Bobcat, and other small car offerings would start to appear, such as the Monarch and the Zephyr. As these cars gained popularity, all midsize models would adopt the Cougar name and styling. In 1979, the big Mercurys would be downsized to the Panther platform on a 114-inch wheelbase, and the Capri would become a twin to the Fox Body Mustang, meaning the only difference remaining between Ford and Mercury models was trim. The Bobcat would be replaced by the Lynx in 1981, a twin to Ford's Escort, followed a year later by a sporty two-seat version as the LN7. Restructuring for 1983 had the mid-sized offering split back into two lines, with the Zephyr-based Marquis replacing the Cougar sedan and wagon, and an all-new streamlined Cougar coupe continuing on where the Cougar XR7 left off, while the previous full-sized Marquis was renamed the Grand Marquis. 1984 saw the introduction of the so-called front-wheel drive compact World Car, sold at Mercury as the Topaz. In 1986, the mid-sized front-wheel drive Aero sedan with a full front light bar, dubbed the Sable, a look that seemed futuristic at the time, and Mercury would soon adopt on other models, while being the last year of the Mustang-based Capri. But soon Mercury's lineup would begin to more greatly diverge from Ford's once again. starting with the Lynx being replaced by a rebadged Mazda 323 and sold as the Tracer. And by the time the styling on the Topaz was updated in 1988, all-wheel drive had become an option. Mercury would finally get a minivan for 1991, the Villager, reviving their old wagon nomenclature. But instead of being a rebadged Ford, it was a rebadged Nissan Quest. The Tracer was updated, and the Escort would join it as a rebadged Mazda. And at the time, the Capri name would return on a small roadster, developed by Ford of Australia, based on Mazda components, but short-lived. In 1992, the big Mercs were restyled for the first time since the late 70s, with a look and powertrain that more resembled that of the Cougar, a car that would be discontinued after 1997. The same year, the Mercury got its own version of the Ford Explorer as the Mountaineer, returning Mercury to the truck market after 30 years, and still being slightly upmarket of its Ford counterpart. Speaking of Ford counterparts, a variation of the European Mondeo found its way to the US by this point, and at Mercury it was being sold as the Mystique, but they never really saw the success in the US they saw in Europe. That didn't stop them from introducing a sporty coupe version for 1999, reviving the Cougar name. Soon both versions would be gone, however, as would the subcompact Tracer. The Grand Marquis would continue on, however, and the Marauder Performance version would be revived, essentially a Crown Victoria police package with a blackout treatment. The mid-2000s would see restructuring of the lineup with the new Montego and Milan sedans, as well as the Monterey minivan and Mariner compact SUV, all being dressed-up Ford models. But declining sales got even worse as Mercury floundered without any real brand image. And in 2010, Mercury was shuttered as no longer being a necessary part of Ford. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.